When it comes to sort of the government and how they're sort of approaching this sort of Islamic State threat, are they winning the internal war here?
Islamic State, or ISIS, one could call it, Daesh, as the Arabs call it, it's a formidable force. It's presenting a massive challenge for the government. One could call this an existential conflict and struggle for the government. It's holding its land, once again, it's holding its land well in Syria. It's extreme. In Iraq, it's holding the second largest city. It's holding the Anbar province, and it's threatening to gain more territory. But I think at its stage, I think it's sort of peaked in Iraq itself and is trying to make some smaller gains in different parts. Like when we want, but they're not so much a threat for the Kurdish region, although one has to be careful. The attacks in Ramadi, I would say, are far more serious because the attack in Ramadi, 80% of the province of Anbar they control, Ramadi being the capital of the Anbar province, is that the Iraqi government took it from ISIS. Now ISIS is threatening to take it back. There's a strong possibility they can take it back. So it shows that they're formidable and they're a force to be reckoned with in specific parts of Iraq, specifically in the west and in the north.
And when you look at cities like Baghdad as well, and the Shia militia within the country as well, who were once previously enemies of the Sunni regime, how important is it to unite forces within the country to fight IS?
Extremely important. Without that unity, without that sense of national unity, Iraq has no future. So basically you have is, in Ramadi specifically, due to political pressure by the United States and the central government in Baghdad, they were telling the Shia militias to sort of restrain them. Not to pull them back completely, but to restrain them. Elements that left Ramadi created a void. Hence, ISIS forces have filled that in. And that underscores the importance of the effectiveness of the Shia militias. But the Shia militias, once again, they present in the short term, they're an advantage, they're an asset for the government because they're an effective fighting force. But in the long term, they also present a threat. And the fact is that if they keep becoming stronger and stronger, in the long term, they can become more independent and present a threat to the government, whereby the government may not be able to control them and actually begin to compete with the Iraqi National Army. So one needs to strike a balance. The current prime minister is confronting a dilemma in how to strike that balance. Eventually, they need to be reined in and included in the wider security forces, which need to reflect the sort of multi-ethnic what Iraq is as a multi-ethnic country. Needs to present it and not to be purely sectarian.
So you've written about this extensively in the past and most recently with the Huffington Post, and you looked at the sort of relationship that Prime Minister al-Abadi will have with the US-led coalition. And we're hearing news, of course, as well of Ezzat Ibrahim al-Duri, who's been allegedly killed in fighting in Iraq. How do you think that the country will greet this news?
Listen, symbolically, the importance of al-Duri's killing is encouraging for the government, very, very encouraging. Symbolically. From an operational perspective, is completely irrelevant. Al-Duri was you can call it somewhat of a spent force. Last year, he was running an insurgent element against the current government, but within the wider scope of the conflict, he was a minimal force. He obviously greeted the ISIS invasion in June of last year when they stormed Mosul and actually joined forces with them, but heavily criticized them about their treatment of local communities. So although he allied himself with ISIS forces, from an operational perspective, he did not contribute much to them, and he differed them vastly in terms of how they treated local populations. And so basically is that the government can claim that they killed one of Saddam's right-hand men, but he's more or less something, he's already of history. He's from a force of the past.
Yeah. When it comes to sort of the future of the country, you touched on it just then, but what do you think needs to happen to ensure a safe, secure and calm environment for Iraq?
Well, basically, ISIS, Daesh, it presents the greatest short-term threat to the Iraqi government, an existential threat. But what fuels the fires of ISIS is basically the ethnic sectarian division within the country. If the current government in Baghdad fails to overcome that ethno-sectarian division, the country will eventually fall apart. Some may even argue that the country is already, de facto, there's been partition. But the reality of the situation is that if Abadi, the current government, is not able to create a form of ethnic sectarian cooperation, collaboration, and a stability for the country in the future, whereby all are benefiting. And all are benefiting from the oil. From the oil, where it comes back from the oil industry, and basically they need to have a sense of enfranchisement, feel a part of the society, inclusion, and until Abadi's predecessor under al-Maliki, there was a policy of exclusion. So if inclusion is not a policy of the current government, if they're not effectively create a sense of inclusion, Iraq will fail to exist as a nation.
Marco Vicenzino, thank you very much indeed. Really interesting to talk to you.
Thank you.